I never thought I would be the guy who finds himself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I'm just a regular guy who works a 9 to 5 in marketing. I've been married to Lisa for 5 years. We were high school sweethearts, and at one point I thought we had it all figured out. We had a decent house in the suburbs, a dog named Max, and friends who thought we were the perfect couple. But lately, something felt off. My gut instinct started kicking in about 6 months ago. It was subtle at first. The way Lisa would glance at her phone whenever I walked into the room, her sudden insistence on going out with the girls more frequently, and the late-night text messages that she would quickly hide when I walked by. I tried to shake it off as paranoia. After all, I had no concrete evidence, just a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me something was wrong. Then, one day, I accidentally found a receipt in her purse while looking for a pen. It was for a hotel, a nice one downtown, with a date that corresponded to a weekend she claimed she was out of town visiting her sister. My heart dropped. I tried reasoning with myself that there could be a logical explanation. Maybe she planned a surprise party for me, or perhaps she went there to get some quiet time away from the house. But deep down, I knew that was a stretch. That evening, when she got home, I confronted her. It started with a calm conversation. "Hey, Lisa, I found this receipt. What's this about?" My voice trembled slightly, but I kept it steady, trying to maintain the facade of composure. She stared at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" she replied, her tone rising defensively. "That's just something I bought for a friend's birthday party. You're being ridiculous." I felt the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Ridiculous? You expect me to believe that? This isn't like you, Lisa. You've been acting strange lately." Her response was a classic deflection. "Oh, come on, you're just being paranoid. I've been stressed with work, you know that." The conversation escalated quickly. She claimed I was being controlling, that I was suffocating her. The more she talked, the more I felt the walls closing in. I was left with a mix of confusion and rage, but I pushed through it, desperate for the truth. "Lisa, just tell me the truth. Are you cheating on me?" For a moment there was silence. Then she exploded. "You're unbelievable. I can't believe you would even think that. You're just trying to make me feel guilty for wanting a little space." That was when I knew. The defensive outburst, the refusal to even acknowledge the possibility. I could see it in her eyes. I felt like I was standing in front of a mirror that shattered into 1,000 pieces. After she stormed off to the bedroom, I sat in the living room, heart racing and mind racing even faster. I was devastated. The woman I loved, who I thought would always be by my side, was lying straight to my face. The next few days felt like a blur. I tried to gather my thoughts, but my mind was a chaotic mess. I lost interest in work. My friends noticed something was off, but I couldn't tell them. I didn't want anyone to know my wife was cheating on me. It was too humiliating. As I struggled with this turmoil, I reminded myself of the person I used to be, the kid who got bullied in high school and learned to fight back. I hadn't thought about that kid in years. He was buried under layers of adulthood, but he suddenly felt alive again, angry and ready to make a comeback. With this newfound resolve, I started digging deeper. I needed answers, and if Lisa was hiding something, I was determined to uncover the truth. I set out to find out just how far her betrayal went and who the other person might be. I could feel the storm brewing inside me, but I knew I had to stay focused. The game was about to change, and I was no longer the passive husband. I was ready to take back control, to ensure that Lisa would regret what she did to me. This was just the beginning, and I had no idea how it would unfold. But deep down, I was ready for whatever came next. If you want to hear more from this journey, let me know. After the confrontation with Lisa, I felt an overwhelming need to gather evidence. I had to know for certain whether my suspicions were justified. It wasn't just about the hotel receipt anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from the chaos that was threatening to consume me. The first step was to observe her behavior closely. I started paying attention to everything: how often she was on her phone, what time she came home from her outings, and how she acted around me. The more I watched, the clearer it became that something was indeed going on. She would often slip away to the bathroom during dinner, always seeming to have urgent messages to reply to. The late-night texts continued, and I could feel my blood boiling each time she jumped at the ping of her phone. One evening, after she had gone out with her friends, I made a decision. While she was out, I went through her things. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I felt like I had no choice. The sense of betrayal was too much. I started with her purse, rifling through it until I came upon her phone. I hesitated for a moment, second-guessing my decision, but the desperation to know the truth outweighed my guilt. After some fiddling with the phone, thankfully she kept it unlocked. I opened her messages. What I found sent a chill down my spine. Text from a guy named Tom, a name I recognized immediately. Tom had been my childhood bully. The kid who made my life hell on the playground, who threw my lunch into the trash, and who laughed at me for not being able to stand up for myself. It was a sickening feeling, like I had swallowed a rock. The messages were flirty at first, but quickly escalated to something much more explicit. They joked about meeting up and how much they missed each other. I could hardly breathe. My mind raced with a mix of emotions: anger, humiliation, a desire for revenge that simmered just beneath the surface. I dug deeper, scrolling through their conversations. It was clear they had been communicating for weeks, maybe even months. The betrayal stung, each message like a knife twisting in my gut. I felt sick, not just because of the affair, but because it was with the one person I despised the most. The irony was not lost on me. My wife, who I had trusted with everything, was cheating on me with the very person who had made my childhood a nightmare. Once I had enough evidence, I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront her again, but this time it would be different. I would show her that I was no longer the passive, naive husband she had taken for granted. I would expose her lies and her infidelity, and I would make her feel the weight of her decisions. The next day, I decided to approach her calmly. I wanted to remain collected, even if my insides were churning with rage. I waited until she returned home from work, forcing myself to act like nothing was wrong. I made dinner, even putting on her favorite playlist in an effort to keep the atmosphere light. When she walked in, I smiled, and for a moment I almost forgot everything that had happened. But as she sat down and started eating, the facade began to crumble. I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady yet strained. Her smile faltered as she looked up at me. "About what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "I saw your messages with Tom," I said, watching her face fall. The color drained from her cheeks and she opened her mouth to respond, but I pressed on. "Don't even try to deny it. I know everything. The texts, the plans to meet up, it's all there." She stammered, "Jake, I can explain. It's not what you think. I was just what? Flirting with the guy who made my life miserable. It's pathetic, Lisa." My voice raised unintentionally, the hurt and anger spilling out. She dropped her fork, her eyes darting around as if searching for a way to escape. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just a mistake. You don't understand how lonely I've been. You've been so distant." "Distant? Maybe I wouldn't have been if you hadn't pushed me away." I shot back. "You think going behind my back with him is going to solve anything? You're throwing away everything we built together for what? A thrill. A cheap thrill with a loser from our past." Her face flushed with anger now. "You don't get to talk down to me like that. You have no idea what I've been going through." "Then let's talk about it. But not while you're sneaking around with my bully." The conversation spiraled, leading to more accusations and hurtful words than I ever imagined we would exchange. I felt like I was fighting a battle not just for my marriage but for my dignity. Every insult she threw my way was a reminder of how far we had fallen. Eventually, the argument reached a boiling point, and Lisa stormed out of the house. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding in my chest, feeling both victorious and crushed. I had finally confronted her, but at what cost? That night, as I lay in bed alone, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. The shock, the anger, the sadness, it all swirled around me, threatening to drown me. I felt like a stranger in my own life, and I had no idea what was coming next. But one thing was clear: I was done being the victim. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make sure Lisa regretted her choices. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I was ready to embrace whatever chaos awaited me. If you're interested in hearing how things unfold, Just let me know. After the explosive confrontation with Lisa, I realized I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in despair or take charge of my life and turn this situation into something empowering. There was no way I was going to let her betrayal define me. Instead, I would channel my pain into action, and that's exactly what I began to do. The first step was to gather more evidence, not just for my sake, but to confront her with undeniable proof. I needed to know the full extent of her relationship with Tom. I had already found messages, but I felt like I needed to delve deeper. I started to track her whereabouts more closely, using social media and even her shared calendar to see when she was planning her outings. It was during one of those nights when she was supposedly out with friends that I decided to follow her. I didn't want to, but I needed to know where she was going and who she was with. Armed with my car and a sense of determination, I waited until she left the house, slipping out behind her without her noticing. I followed her to a bar on the outskirts of town, one that I recognized from her previous comments. It was a dive bar, a place that catered more to the local crowd than the trendy spots we usually frequented. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she chatted with a group of friends, laughing and sipping cocktails. I felt a surge of jealousy and anger boiling inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to see if Tom would show up. I didn't have to wait long. About an hour into my vigil, I saw him walk through the door smirking, looking like he owned the place. My heart raced as I watched them interact. At first, they were just casual greetings, but soon enough they were laughing together, leaning closer and whispering secrets that made her giggle. I felt like the ground had fallen out from underneath me. This wasn't just a fling. There was a connection there, a chemistry that made my blood boil. I was blindsided by a rush of emotions, rage, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I couldn't just sit back and watch this unfold. I wanted to storm in there and confront them right then and there, but I knew that would only give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I had to play this smart. Instead of confronting them, I took out my phone and started recording. I captured them flirting, the way she touched his arm, the way she smiled at him like no one else existed. I recorded it all, knowing that this would be the perfect ammunition to use against her later. After about an hour, I decided I had seen enough. I didn't need to watch her make a fool of herself any longer. As they continued to drink and laugh, I slipped out of the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. I had the evidence I needed, and now I could prepare for my next move. Over the next few days, I replayed the footage in my mind, analyzing every moment. I felt a mix of anger and a strange sense of satisfaction. I was no longer the victim. I was the one holding the cards. I focused on my work, pouring myself into projects and starting to redirect my energy. I even began to work out more, using the anger to fuel my workouts, feeling stronger and more empowered with each passing day. But I knew I needed to confront Lisa again, and this time I wouldn't be backing down. I planned to expose her and make her face the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. The day finally came when I felt ready to reveal everything. I set up a meeting at home, making sure to keep the atmosphere calm and collected. When she walked in, I could see the tension in her eyes, but I played the part of the composed husband, the man who was ready to confront his wife but without the emotional chaos that had defined our previous discussions. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady as I gestured for her to sit down. She immediately looked nervous, biting her lip as she took a seat across from me. "What's this about?" "I have something to show you," I replied, pulling out my laptop and opening the video I had recorded. I could see her brow furrow as I clicked play, the screen lighting up with the images of her and Tom, laughing, touching, and flirting like I had never seen her do with me. Her expression morphed from confusion to horror within seconds, and I felt a sick sense of satisfaction wash over me as I watched her face drain of color. "Jake, please, you don't understand." She stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I cut her off. "No, Lisa, you don't get to talk your way out of this. I've seen everything. I know you've been lying to me and you've been doing it with him." She opened her mouth, then closed it, searching for words, her eyes wide with panic. "I was just lonely. You had been so distant and I felt like I was losing you, losing me. I scoffed, feeling my anger boiling over. You chose to cheat instead of talking to me. You chose him, the guy who made my life hell as a kid. That's your answer. I thought I could make it work. It didn't mean anything, she pleaded. I shook my head, feeling the weight of betrayal heavier than ever. You thought you could just brush it aside, huh? You thought this wouldn't come back to bite you. Well, guess what? I'm done with your excuses. The confrontation continued, and I could see the helplessness in her eyes as she realized there was no way out of this. I laid it all out, the evidence, the lies, and how she had destroyed everything we'd built together. It was a raw, emotional moment where I finally felt free from her manipulation. As the conversation escalated, I could see her defenses breaking down. The proud, arrogant woman who had once belittled me was now crumbling before my eyes. I didn't revel in it. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had taken back control of my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. This was the beginning of my revenge, and I was prepared to make sure that Lisa felt every consequence of her actions. I had no idea how far this would go, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't be the same guy who let life happen to him. I was in the driver's seat now, and I was ready to take charge. If you're curious about how I executed my plan next, just let me know. After the confrontation with Lisa, I realized that the emotional fallout was just beginning. The anger I felt was like a fire burning inside me, but I also knew that I needed a plan. Revenge wasn't just about making her feel bad. It was about taking control of my life and ensuring that she understood the weight of her betrayal. I decided to take a two-pronged approach. First, I would focus on my career. If there was one thing I could control, it was my professional success. I had been working in marketing for several years, but I felt like I had been treading water, unsure of how to advance. With this newfound sense of purpose, I poured myself into my work, determined to rise above my circumstances. I started staying late at the office, volunteering for projects and networking like I never had before. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, not just for myself, but also as a way to show Lisa what she lost. I wanted her to see me flourishing in a way she never could have imagined. As I immersed myself in work, I also made a conscious effort to reconnect with old friends. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years, high school buddies, former colleagues, even people I had lost touch with during my marriage. I wanted to remind myself that I was more than just Lisa's husband. I was Jake, a person with interests, skills, and a life outside of our relationship. One of my old friends, Ryan, was particularly supportive. We had been close in high school, and after hearing about my situation, he encouraged me to embrace my freedom. You deserve to be happy, man. Let's hit the gym together and make sure you're living your best life, he said. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself looking forward to our workouts. At the gym, I poured my anger into lifting weights, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. I felt stronger both physically and mentally. Each drop of sweat was a release, and with every rep I felt my confidence growing. I was becoming the man I had always wanted to be, and it felt incredible. As I focused on self-improvement, I also started to think about how to make Lisa realize the extent of her betrayal. It was enough for me to just move on. I wanted her to know what she lost. I began to formulate a plan, one that would hit her where it hurt the most. I researched Tom, and what I found was both surprising and infuriating. He was no longer the punk kid I remembered. He was now a struggling musician trying to make a name for himself. I learned that he played at local bars and had a small following. It hit me then. What if I used that to my advantage? I decided to visit one of his shows. It was risky, but I wanted to confront him and make my presence known. I wanted Lisa to see that I was no longer the shy, weak kid she once knew. I was a man, and I was ready to stand up for myself. The night of the show, I arrived early and secured a spot near the front. As the venue filled up, I could see Lisa sitting at a table with some friends, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she scanned the room for Tom. I felt a mix of satisfaction and anger knowing that she thought she could enjoy herself. While I was heartbroken at home, when Tom finally took the stage, he lit up the crowd with his charm and charisma. I watched as Lisa leaned in, fully captivated by the performance. It made my stomach turn, but this was my moment. I had to remind her who was really in control. I waited until he finished his first song and then I made my move. I pushed through the crowd, determined to stand right in front of her. When Tom noticed me, his smile faded slightly, but he kept playing. I could feel Lisa's eyes catch on my movement, her expression going from joy to shock as she registered who was standing in front of her. "Enjoying the show?" I asked, my voice calm but dripping with sarcasm. Her eyes widened and she immediately stood up, trying to pull me aside. "Jake, what are you doing here?" she whispered, panic evident in her voice. "I thought I'd come see what all the fuss was about," I said, looking at Tom, who had finally stopped playing. "Looks like your boyfriend has quite the following, huh?" Tom's face shifted from surprise to a cocky grin. He stepped off the stage and approached us. "Hey man, good to see you. Are you a fan of my music?" he asked, clearly enjoying the moment. I couldn't help but smirk. "Yeah, I'm a fan of who you think you are. Do you really think you're worth risking everything for, Lisa?" I turned to her, fully aware that I was making a scene, but I didn't care. "Do you think this is what you really want?" Her face flushed and I could see the realization dawning on her. This was my payback, and it felt so good to finally make her squirm. Tom tried to defuse the situation. "Come on, man. Let's keep things cool. It's just music, right?" I shot him a glare. "This isn't just music for her. It's a betrayal. You think you can just waltz in and play the hero while ruining my life?" The crowd around us began to take notice, and I could see Lisa's friends glancing over, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. I felt powerful in that moment, like I was reclaiming my dignity. "Let's go," I said to Lisa, grabbing her arm. She did resist, but her expression was a mix of anger and frustration. As we stepped outside, the cool night air hit us and I turned to her, my voice low but firm. "You need to understand the gravity of what you've done. This isn't just a little fling, you're playing with lives here. You made your choice and now you're going to have to deal with the consequences." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I don't want to hear it. You made your bed, now lie in it." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone and exposed. The adrenaline from the confrontation coursed through me as I drove home. I knew I had taken a significant step, one that would leave a mark on both Lisa and Tom. I was no longer a victim. I had stood up for myself, and it felt liberating. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt empowered, but there was still a part of me that mourned what we had lost. I had lost my best friend, my partner, and the life I thought we would build together. But I also recognized that I was free now, free to redefine who I was. As I continued to focus on my career and self-improvement, I felt a sense of purpose growing within me. I was no longer the same person who cowered beneath the weight of betrayal. I was ready for whatever came next, and I was determined to make the most of my new life. If you're curious about how I navigated the aftermath of my confrontation and what the future held for me, just let me know. The aftermath of the confrontation at Tom's show was intense. I could feel the tension in the air as I returned home, and it was clear that Lisa was struggling to process what had just happened. She hadn't come home that night, and honestly, I didn't care. I felt empowered for the first time in a long while, and it was liberating to know that I was no longer going to be a passive participant in my own life. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my work. I was on a mission to climb the corporate ladder, and I made it clear to my boss, Karen, that I was ready for more responsibility. I volunteered for projects, took the lead on presentations, and even started mentoring interns who were just starting out in their careers. I was fueled by a newfound sense of purpose, and it was paying off. I was getting noticed. Every time I received recognition at work, I imagined Lisa sitting at home, regretting her choices. I wanted her to see me thriving and to realize that her infidelity had cost her everything. I wanted her to feel the weight of her decisions. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I couldn't just focus on revenge. I had to think about what I truly wanted for my future. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, my happiness, and the person I wanted to become. I knew the marriage was over, but I had to figure out how to move forward. With each passing day, I felt more confident about the decision I was leaning toward, ending my marriage with Lisa for good. I began to make plans to speak with a lawyer. I needed to ensure that, when I finally took that step, I would be protected. I wanted to end this chapter of my life without unnecessary drama, and I knew that having a solid plan in place would help. Around this time, Lisa finally returned home after a long absence. She looked disheveled, and there was an air of defeat around her. I could see the exhaustion on her face, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I quickly reminded myself of the pain she had caused me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not wanting to drag this out any longer. "Let's talk." We sat down at the dining table, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. She took a deep breath, and I could see her trying to gather her thoughts. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About what?" I replied, my tone flat. I wasn't interested in excuses. "About us, about everything. I realize I made a huge mistake," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never meant to hurt you, Jake. I was just confused and scared." "Confused, scared. You didn't think about how your actions would affect me. You thought it was okay to cheat on your husband with my childhood bully." I couldn't help but let the anger seep through. "You think saying you're sorry is going to fix everything." She flinched at my words, but I wasn't about to back down. "I saw you with him, Lisa. I saw how you looked at him. It's not just a mistake, it's a betrayal on so many levels." "I know I'm not perfect," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "But I want to work on this. I want to try to rebuild what we had." I took a moment to process her words. It was a tempting offer, but deep down I knew I couldn't go back to the life we had. "You can't just expect me to forget what you've done. Trust is broken, and I don't think it can ever be repaired. But we can make it work. We can go to counseling, we can try to fix this together," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I shook my head, feeling the weight of my decision. "No, Lisa, I don't want to fix this. I can't. I need to think about my future, and I don't see a future with you anymore." Her face fell, and I watched as the realization hit her. She wasn't going to get the reconciliation she hoped for. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You're just going to throw everything away?" "Yes, I am," I replied firmly. "I deserve better than this, and so do you. We both need to move on." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the tears streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy. I had given her a chance to come clean and make amends, but she had chosen to continue lying. It was time for me to reclaim my life. "I'm going to speak with a lawyer," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't just about us anymore, it's about what's best for me moving forward." She nodded slowly, tears still falling. "I understand," she whispered, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness at her acceptance. I had finally taken control of my life, and I was ready to embrace the future. The following weeks were filled with discussions with my lawyer about the divorce process. I focused on protecting my assets and ensuring that I would be in a good position moving forward. I felt a sense of relief as I made these decisions, knowing that I was taking steps toward a brighter future without the weight of my past holding me back. I also continued to thrive at work. My boss recognized my hard work and offered me a promotion, which I eagerly accepted. It felt incredible to see my career flourishing while my personal life was in shambles. I was learning to embrace my independence, and I felt a newfound confidence that I had never experienced before. Eventually, the paperwork was finalized, and my divorce was official. It felt surreal to sign those documents, but I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation wash over me. I was finally free from the marriage that had turned toxic, and I knew I had made the right decision. As I moved into the next phase of my life, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had learned from this experience. I had faced betrayal, but I had also found my strength. I had turned my pain into motivation, and I was determined to create a future that was filled with happiness and fulfillment. If you're interested in how I navigated life post-divorce and what I learned along the way, just let me know. The official divorce was a turning point in my life. It marked the end of a chapter filled with betrayal, pain, and confusion. But more importantly, it was the beginning of a new journey, one that was entirely mine. I had gone through hell, but I emerged stronger and more determined than ever to create a life that I would be proud of. After the divorce, I took some time to reflect on what I wanted moving forward. I had spent many years wrapped up in my marriage, and now I needed to rediscover who I was outside of that relationship. I started taking up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but had put off for one reason or another. I signed up for a cooking class, something that had always intrigued me. I wanted to learn how to prepare dishes that could impress not just others but also myself. I discovered that I enjoyed the process of creating something from scratch, and it became a therapeutic outlet for me. I even started hosting dinner parties for friends, showcasing my newfound culinary skills. I also rekindled my love for travel. I had always dreamed of seeing the world, but I often put those dreams on the back burner while I was married. I booked a solo trip to Italy, eager to embrace the culture, the food, and the freedom to explore without anyone else's agenda. I walked the streets of Rome, sipped wine in Tuscany, and marveled at the art in Florence. It was a liberating experience, and I felt more alive than I had in years. Back home, I continued to focus on my career. The promotion I received after my divorce came with new responsibilities, and I tackled them with enthusiasm. I found myself thriving in my work environment, earning the respect of my colleagues, and even stepping into a leadership role. It was a stark contrast to the self-doubt that had plagued me during my marriage. As I built my life back up, I also made it a point to surround myself with positive influences. I reconnected with old friends and made an effort to cultivate new relationships. I found that my experiences allowed me to connect with others on a deeper level. People admired my strength, and I began to attract friends who were supportive and encouraging. One evening, while I was out with friends, I met Sarah. She was intelligent and funny, with a zest for life that drew me in. We struck up a conversation and quickly found that we had much in common. It felt refreshing to connect with someone who had her own strong identity, someone who appreciated me for who I had become rather than who I used to be. As we continued to date, I found myself falling for her. It was a new experience for me, dating someone who respected my boundaries and cherished my individuality. With Sarah, I could be myself without the shadow of past mistakes looming over us. We shared laughter and adventures, exploring more of the world together. Looking back, I realized the importance of healing and self-discovery. My marriage to Lisa had taught me invaluable lessons about trust, respect, and the significance of valuing oneself. I learned that true happiness starts from within, and that it's crucial to surround yourself with people who uplift and inspire you. As I moved forward, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had taken. It had been painful, yes, but every step had brought me closer to the person I was meant to be. I didn't need revenge to find peace. I found it by reclaiming my life and embracing the possibilities that lay ahead. In the end, I learned not just to survive but to thrive. I learned that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most difficult experiences. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me. As I stood on the precipice of my new life, I felt hopeful. I was ready for love, success, and the adventures that awaited me. My story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I had taken back control, and I was ready to write the next chapter on my own terms.